Many Illinois residents will soon see an increase in their natural gas utility bill, just as winter weather is arriving in the Midwest. And Operation Midway Blitz may be winding down, but the court cases surrounding it are still going on. From Capital News, Illinois, it's Friday, November 21st, and this is Capital Cast. Hello and welcome to another edition of Capital Cast, a regular podcast of Capital News, Illinois. I'm Peter Hancock, and I'm here today with my colleagues Maggie Dougherty, who joins us from her base in the Chicago area. Maggie, thanks for being here.
Hi, Peter. Glad to be here.
And also with us is our editor-in-chief, Jerry Nowicki, who joins us from Springfield. Jerry.
Hey, Peter.
Yeah. So I wanted to start off with the news about natural gas rates, mainly because it is now late November. Winter weather it's starting to get cold outside in most parts of Illinois, including outside my house. That always causes people to start thinking about utility bills that they'll be paying in the winter. There are two major natural gas companies that serve the bulk of Illinois consumers, Ameren and Nicor, and they were both approved this week for some significant rate hikes, but not quite as much as they had wanted. Maggie, you covered this for CNI. Tell us what's going on with our gas bills.
Yeah, absolutely. So Nicor and Ameren, as you said, were both approved for big increases, although not as big as they had requested. The ICC, the Illinois Commerce Commission, ended up cutting their requests by over 40%, 47% for Nicor and 43% for Ameren. So they ended up being approved, Nicor for $168 million rate increase and Ameren for a $73 million increase in rates. So that will affect people's bills this month, but not as much as it would have if they had approved the full rate.
Yeah, so what does it mean to me or to any other residential customer? How 147 million, what does that break down to like per household?
Yeah, so Nicor has estimated that it'll be less than $4.25 per month on monthly bills, less than a 5% increase annually. Ameren has said that they're going to take some more time and look at the calculations to figure out exactly how much it'll be. But based on their original request back in January, which was for $134 million, that would have been $9 a month. So certainly we'll be looking at less than that.
Okay, and have the company said what these rate increases are for? I mean, what's the money going to be going to?
Yeah, so a lot of it's about repairing and improving infrastructure. So to get the gas to you in the coldest days of the winter months, that's how they justify it. You know, they need these systems to be up and running at full capacity. And they also talk about investments to, for example, Ameren has these natural gas storage fields where they are able to buy gas during the summer months at lower rates and then keep it there and provide it during the winter. So it's all these kinds of investments and infrastructure things, but consumer and environmental advocates will tell you that doesn't maybe need to happen right this second. That cost doesn't need to be inflicted upon consumers at this moment because Nicor's system is up and running well. These systems are for the most part working as they're intended to.
Okay, and so how soon will we see these rates go into effect? I mean, when are we going to see a spike in our bills?
I think we should see those go into effect this January.
Okay, well, thanks for that coverage. Want to turn now to the other major story that has been going on this week and will probably continue to be a story in Illinois, may in fact become a regular element of the podcast for months to come. And that has to do with the federal court cases flowing out of Operation Midway Blitz. That was the stepped up kind of militarized immigration enforcement action that was launched by the Trump administration earlier this year in the Chicago area. It is reported that that operation is winding down, but the court cases are still going on. One of the court cases we've been following focused on the kinds of tactics that law enforcement could use and other federal agents could use in trying to control the protests and demonstrations surrounding this enforcement action. Jerry, why don't you catch us up on the latest regarding that case?
Yeah, so the Seventh Circuit had two big things they did this week. One of them was they stayed the order in the riot control case. Um, that was essentially the immigration agents, the lower judge had found they were using force without warning. They were shooting pepper balls, tear gas on protesters, on journalists. And she put a stay on that, without proper warning and whatnot, that they weren't allowed to do that. But the Seventh Circuit found that to be overbroad, and that the judge in her November 6th order had overstepped and infringed on how the executive branch conducts law enforcement. But he also urged, readers of the decision or the court not to overread today's order, and said the evidence that was brought to Judge Sarah Ellis, quote, may support entry of a more tailored and appropriate injunction. So that was a big one.
Okay, so the lower court said that federal agents were using excessive force. They were using tear gas, rubber bullets, other kinds of, pretty intense enforcement efforts to control crowds, to control demonstrators, and in some cases to suppress media coverage of it. And so what you're saying is that the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals has put a stay on that order. Does that essentially free up law enforcement to go back to their old tactics?
I don't know that law enforcement ever stopped those tactics. Law enforcement has left Chicago. So there was a question as to whether the order was ever being followed at any point. This is sort of just, there's going to be another shoe to drop in this. It's sort of like an incremental step. Okay. But, I'd expect them to, I wouldn't expect too much of a change in any activity at this point.
You mentioned that there was another major action that came out of the Seventh Circuit. What was that about?
Yeah, another lower court federal judge had ordered the release of hundreds of people detained in Chicago since Midway Blitz began, and even before that, Chicago and elsewhere. But and this dates back to a 2022 consent decree that came about during the first Trump administration about whether the agents were making arrests without warrants. So somewhere around 400 people, more than 400 people were set to be released Friday, but the Seventh Circuit stayed that lower court's order until it could be appealed, until the broader case could be appealed. And there's I think a December 2nd hearing scheduled for that.
Okay, and there was also a case involving a number of protesters who had been criminally charged related to their actions during protests and demonstrations. What's the status of the charges against those individuals?
Well, I think that's kind of one of the main takeaways of this week is that this week and recent weeks and just the whole federal government's charges in this Operation Midway Blitz, the sheer flimsiness of what they're charging protesters with. Miramar, the one galling one is Miramar Martinez was actually shot by Border Patrol either in October or September. They said she had rammed a car, but the defense was going to strenuously push back against that, citing body camera video that hadn't been reviewed in court, but had been described at least. So one of the major things to happen there was this Border Patrol agent who shot her, Charles Exum, I'm not sure how you say that, but they unearthed text set via telegram that he had sent that he was, quote, up for another round of F around and find out. And he also texted, fellow Border Patrol agents and said, read it. I fired 5 shots and she had 7 holes. Put that in your book, boys. So the defense was prepared to describe those texts in court, and then the federal government dropped the charges. Well, also on September 27th, protests related to several protests on the 27th, the feds had tried 5 people. All of them had now had their cases dismissed. And Magistrate Judge Gabriel Fuentes this week issued a 9-page opinion and said, normally when we're dismissing, we just issue a short order, but the sheer, he called maybe unprecedentedness of these instances required a broader opinion. And he wrote, the court cannot help but note just how unusual and possibly unprecedented it is for the U.S. Attorney's Office in the district to charge so hastily that it either could not obtain the indictment in the grand jury or was forced to dismiss upon a conclusion that the case is not provable in repeated cases of a similar nature. So, I mean, what you're seeing here is a broad overreach by the federal government, and judges recognizing that.
Okay, and so as we are speaking here, there have been reports that Operation Midway Blitz is winding down in the Chicago area, possibly relocating to warmer climates around Charlotte, North Carolina. Do we get any sense that these court cases and these decisions will serve as precedent should similar kinds of challenges occur in Charlotte or any of the other cities where the administration is launching these kinds of immigration enforcement actions?
I mean, I would think they would, and I think the feds have even alluded to the fact that they're going to be back in March when it starts to warm up again. So, I highly doubt we've seen the end of immigration enforcement in Chicago. I think the activists, the advocates are all on guard there in the city. I think the lawyers are still gearing up for these fights. And I think the state commission charged with recognizing abuses is also gearing up as well.
Okay, well, one other legal-related story that I did want to touch on just briefly here this week has to do with former House Speaker Michael Madigan. He is now serving a 7+ year sentence in federal prison after being convicted of some public corruption-related charges. But he has also been disbarred by the Illinois Supreme Court. Jerry, what can you tell us about that? I mean, was this kind of an automatic thing? I guess if you're convicted of felonies and sent to prison, you can't remain as a practicing attorney.
One would assume, but I think the interesting nugget our colleague Hannah Meisel uncovered here or reported upon here is that he, known, in her words, quote, known for his fastidiousness, even beat the Supreme Court to the punch. 2 months before he reported to a West Virginia prison in October, Madigan filed a motion with the High Court to have his name stricken from the roll of attorneys admitted to the state bar. An administrator for the court's Attorney Registration Disciplinary Commission wrote that on the date Madigan filed his August 19th motion, she was investigating Madigan's criminal conduct. So, yeah, he probably would have been disbarred, but, ever the paperwork filer, he was prepared to take himself from the rolls.
Went ahead and surrendered his license anyway before they got around to it. Okay, well, that is all the time we have for this edition of Capital Cast. A programming note, we will be off next week as we all take a little bit of a break for the holidays. We want to wish everyone else a happy Thanksgiving, and we hope you're able to enjoy some time with your friends and family as well. If you're traveling this weekend, please be safe, and we will be back again in early December. In the meantime, this is Peter Hancock on behalf of the entire Capital News Illinois team saying thank you for listening.